So the Tactical Brit just released another video talking about the issue with the Warzone servers in general. And if you've been having issues yourself, then this video might actually explain quite a bit to you. The video is called "This is Why Black Ops 6 Warzone Feels So Bad." And as you can see, I am funny enough in the video. So I wanted to go ahead and showcase this to you all so that we could discuss it together. Either way, let's go ahead and make this full screen, and I will get rid of my camera until my other camera is gone.
I'm going to start this video by showing you a clip from Expel, who recently reacted to one of my own videos, and I think you need to see this. Quality improvements that were really good. But within the space of 10 hours, you...
Holy schmoly, did you see how fast he got obliterated by the guy on his right while he was shooting at the guy up top?
really notice all of the stuff that's gone missing, and if my testing's anything to go...
The guy up top killed him. What?
There's a number of QO out.
What is the desync on that? Oh my God, it didn't look like that at all on his screen. And the guy on the side didn't even shoot him on his screen. What the heck? Obviously, this was taken from a video from a few days ago, and that video actually performed very well. And the reason why is because a lot of you all are feeling the exact same thing.
If your experience with Warzone under Black Ops 6 has been the same, you're not alone. Instantaneous deaths, hit registration not working properly, being killed behind cover or around corners has become so prevalent in this version of Black Ops 6's Warzone that I had to look into what in sweet hell was going on with this game.
And actually, there's a clip by Youngsters. You know what? Give me a second. I'm going to pull it up. So funny enough, Youngsters has this clip. It's called Call of Duty's new and improved hit reg, by the way, because with the new update, there should have been improved hit registration. But this proves the exact opposite.
5 squads still operational in the AR.
Now, obviously, it's a little hard to see, but what he did is he took a snipe at this guy, and you can see there's a blood splatter right there. He literally hit the guy, and there's a blood splatter on the wall, but there was no hit marker whatsoever. That's a slow motion. If you look right there, you can see the bullet literally splatters on him, goes through, and hits the wall. And so it's like, all right, why did that? Yeah, he's literally calling out the fact that there's a blood splatter right there.
Because I hit him.
And he does it again. You can see right there, right here. If you zoom in again, you can see there's a blood splatter on the guy, which is absolutely absurd. Like, what the heck is going on? Twice in a row, no hit marker. Yeah, it's absolutely goofy that we're living in a simulation of Warzone right now. It's like stuff that we have seen from the past that we thought we had gotten rid of, and it's all back. Either way, let's go back to the video.
I've had instances of no registration with bullets at all. I've had instances where I've died very, very far behind cover. And I've even had instances where I die seemingly instantaneously.
It's so
if
goofy,
this has been
dude.
your experience, or you're curious about the inner workings of Warzone's server system under Black Ops 6, join me again for another deep dive, where I go into how everything's occurring and how this situation for Warzone is not looking particularly good.
And before he gets into it, I do want to say, y'all need to go subscribe to the Tactical Brit because he has incredible videos on his channel talking about like VPNs and how they work. Obviously talking about the integration, the video we're watching now, talking about how like content creators are making terrible videos when it comes to your settings. There is so much great information on his channel, and that's the reason we're actually watching his video over a bunch of other people, is that he's very well informed.
Because from what I found and from some of my testing and from some of my evidence, we are looking at what could be a really messy situation for the future of Warzone under Black Ops 6. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please do drop a like and consider subscribing. We're on the road to 200.
Like it. All right, cool. We're already subscribed. Or notifications all. We're good. Hey, we're good.
Okay, subscribers. And these deep dives generally involve a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of testing to make sure that I'm bringing you guys as accurate as information as possible that I can to the scene. If the clip I...
And there's a few other people like that. There's a few like back-end people that do incredible things. Obviously people like JGod and similar people. But I talk to a lot of people behind the scenes just to figure out, like, are these things real that we're seeing, or are they fake? Like, you know, like Call of Duty will say this happened in the game, and then you go and test it. You're like, they didn't do that at all. Like, that kind of stuff happens all the time.
I just showed you with Expel feels familiar. It's something that a lot of people refer to as server desync, where someone dies really quickly or something just looks like it wasn't the case, and the experience between one instance of the game and another instance of the game feel radically differently. That's because of how video games work in terms of sending data between your console and your PC to the server, because the game itself actually takes place on the server.
And there's a lot of conversations when it comes to this about things like aim assist. Now, aim assist is on the client side, which is your side, right? Aim assist happens on your console or on your computer or wherever it is that you're at where you're playing with a controller. But the way that the server receives that information and sends it back to you can actually make aim assist basically better than any reaction time a person can humanly have. Because if your latency is, and I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. If your latency is 30 milliseconds, that means for you to send the aim assist information to the server and back, then you will actually end up getting a lower response time than humanly possible, which the average is around 200 milliseconds. So if your aim assist is tracking an enemy, then it's actually going to be better than someone on mouse and keyboard can react and track an enemy in general. Now, obviously, mouse and keyboard controller, it's a whole different argument, but there are things that when it comes to the servers, it's so important to get it right that if they screw it up, it can make one side super unbalanced and ruin the gameplay for a vast number of players. It's absurd.
All of the information about your movement, your kills, your damage, the amount of damage you've dealt to an opponent, whether or not you've registered a kill, all happens on the server side. And it's the job of any modern first-person shooter to communicate information between your game and the server to make sure that what happens on your screen is an accurate representation of what happens in the game and in the server.
And that's what I was talking about with aim assist, is that you will be tracking with aim assist. And if you ever notice, sometimes you'll get aim assist pull. And if you shoot, even if you're way in front of them or way behind them, it's because what you're seeing on your screen isn't actually where it's being processed with aim assist. It's very weird, and it's why people on mouse and keyboard can miss insane shots that should be super easy. Even if they have a hit scan weapon, you'll just miss the shot regardless of how many hertz you have your monitor, like frames per second or whatever it is that you want to say. They will just miss their shots. And that's just one example. Obviously, there's things like desyncs running around corners and things of that nature that is such a big deal whenever it comes to the server that if it gets messed up, it literally ruins the experience. Players will lose games. Players will not want to play anymore. And it happens over and over and over, especially with these big updates.
The amount of information shared between your system and the server is registered in what's known as tick rate. So 10 hertz, for example, is 10 updates per second between your client and the server sending data back and forth between each other. So when you get these desync scenarios, it's likely that something has gone wrong in that pipeline. Either connectivity or your internet has created an issue that information and packets of data aren't being sent or received properly, or there's something wrong with the game and the actual...
I know, I keep pausing, but also another thing is that Call of Duty makes assumptions as to what happens in between these ticks, if you will. And because of that assumption, it could lead towards certain players getting things they should not get and other players not getting things they should get, because a lot about being a Call of Duty player is doing the exact opposite of what's expected. And if the server expects you to do a specific thing, but you don't actually do that thing on your screen, it'll lead to you looking like you're doing that thing and then just you're gone. You're absolutely gone. I swear that's probably what happens with a lot of parachutes and stuff like that, is that Call of Duty expects you to splat. There's not enough like refresh rate on the tick rate. And then you just hit the ground even though you're slamming that button because it expects you to splat.
Actual server system it's using itself that isn't creating an accurate representation of Black Ops 6 and Warzone. This clip in the background that I've shown you from Expel actually features two examples of server desync. The first one is the instantaneous nature at which my character dies. And when you look at the kill cam, which is supposed to be a recreation of what the server saw,
which are terrible.
It looks like the opponent shot at me for a fairly ample amount of time. And it looks like the time to kill that he's experienced seems correct.
Right.
But the time to death and how quickly I perished felt absolutely alien. It felt almost instantaneous. And that's one example of desync, and I'll explain the more nuanced details of that later in this video.
And it's actually really funny because without content creation, and usually I would say content creation is the bane of video games, right? They sway like the decisions that are made behind the scenes because of, you know, the size of their audience, speaking for an audience and things like that, that shouldn't always happen. But in this case, without content creators, people recording it and uploading it on a daily basis, these things would never get addressed or fixed because people would say it and it'd be like, you're out of your mind.
The other one is that Expel notes that he thought I was shot by the second player. And the reason he thought I was shot by the second player is because
I was completely wrong. I just want to get that, like, very, very wrong. If you look it back, it looked like it, but not perfectly. So,
because another example of server desync, which actually was previously fixed, I believe, in the last year by Call of Duty, but seemingly has been unfixed, is that the character model is facing the wrong direction. It looks as though the second person vaulting the wall to the right is looking at me. But if you go back and watch the kill cam, that was never the case at all. He actually just vaulted over the wall and ran away from me and didn't point his gun or character model towards me in any way, shape, or form.
It's so goofy.
And I've got loads of clips and examples of this, of me running around a corner and still receiving damage, and I end up dying.
And it happens
but
less in
multiplayer
multiplayer
I feel
for
I
a
need
reason.
to show you loads and loads of clips of this, because I feel like a lot of what I'm saying right now is resonating with you. And if it is, do drop a comment down below and let me know your experience. Because the server desync in Black Ops 6's version of Warzone is so enhanced and so intense that even to the naked eye and general perception of you looking at the video game, something feels off and something feels wrong.
Right.
So why is this version of Warzone having so many troubles?
I've actually been hearing that the scaling of the maps is completely wrong, which is why a lot of things look wrong, look fuzzy, look messed up. And that can be leading to a lot of misunderstandings whenever it comes to how you're supposed to be playing certain situations.
Well, I recently covered Black Ops 6's multiplayer server situation. And like I mentioned before with server tick rate and updates, Black Ops 6 uses 60Hz servers, which is considered to be pretty good for the industry. There are other more competitive shooters like Valorant and CS, which have historically used 128Hz servers to give better, accurate depictions and more competitive environments.
I'm actually pretty sure that CS may have changed theirs to 60 and then had half ticks, which is weird, but that may be completely wrong. I just know that that's what I heard was going to happen back when CS2 was going to come out, and maybe it did, and maybe it did.
But 60Hz is not bad at all, and it is a pretty solid industry standard. Even so, Black Ops 6 was experiencing trouble, and I will say, for the time being, that seems to have greatly improved. So it's extremely likely that in the case of Black Ops 6's multiplayer server situation, that even though the client and server were sending perfectly good amounts of data between each other and trying to create an accurate depiction, the amount of demand and amount of players playing on those servers meant that the server situation degraded.
Right. And not to get confused here, this is the exact reason why, take for example, the Warzone 2 servers, which I'm pretty sure TheTacticalBrit made a video on, and it's the exact reason they got rid of the bots. Because of these strongholds and the black sites, they had so many bots in the game that filling it up with these entities was literally breaking every server. And I'm 90% sure it was him. He made the video talking about how if Call of Duty would just get rid of the things that we freaking hate, not one person was like, man, I'd really like to get rid of, like, get some bot kills here, dude. Like, no one was doing that, right? So if they would get rid of that, then it would save us 30 ping. And literally, it was overnight, whenever they changed that and got rid of the bots, you could see that they didn't need to lower the players because getting rid of the bots got rid of the entities, which took off server load, which lowered ping and lowered all the issues that we were having. It was so weird, and it's so wild that Activision or Call of Duty or whatever branch of it you want to say doesn't think of these things. And if they do, they're so stubborn to not get rid of it that it's honestly a little gross.
And I think this is what we would call dynamic load shedding. Now, chances are Call of Duty has had to scale up lots of new servers, and all of these servers will have different CPUs, different infrastructures. Some of them will be more powerful than others, and some of them may run into issues. And during my testing for Black Ops 6's multiplayer, you could see, even in a 60Hz environment with an industry standard of updates, that the game was having trouble, including a 30% visual difference between time to kill and time to death, where time to kill refers to how long it takes for you to kill an opponent, and time to death is how fast you die when you receive damage. So if you were to kill somebody, and let's say the weapon damage gives you 800 milliseconds of time to kill between firing your gun and finishing the opponent, the time to death value that that player would experience would be 30% faster. So if the time to kill
oh my god, what?
was 800 milliseconds, the time to death was something closer to 560. And that's in a 60 Hz server environment where things are supposedly operating fairly well. Well, in comes Call of Duty Warzone.
Which is completely
I tested
different.
every single server, pretty much. Every server within the United States, every server within Europe, every server that I could basically get myself into without causing any major problems.
Which, by the way, if you have a NetDuma router, you can just geolocate to a specific area and lock it to where you're only allowed to play within that region. Now, I'm not saying everyone does that, but if you ever see someone on higher ping consistently, that's usually what they're doing. VPNs, and he has a great video on VPNs, which I think you should go watch. VPNs that are for Call of Duty traditionally work a little different. They have this little, basically like middleman where it will force you to ping to a different area, but give you the lowest like ping in game, because you actually end up timing out the matchmaking system, which is why you always saw that VPNs, when a content creator would use it, would take a very long time to get a match, is because you're sitting there trying to time it out. But now if you use a VPN, you still get a match at the exact same rate. So it makes no difference, because they fixed whatever that was on the back end, and now VPNs are completely useless for changing the way that it works, at least gaming VPNs. Obviously, if you use like NordVPN, ExpressVPN, Surfshark, or whatever the hell it is that you want to use, then you'll actually end up in a different country, which is why you'll have super high pings when you should have like 30 milliseconds ping, regardless of where you're at max. So just a thought.
And I found that every single one of them is running at 20 Hz.
Incredible.
I said prior to
Nothing
the
new.
integration of Black Ops 6 with Warzone that if Call of Duty didn't invest in higher tick servers and better communication, that you would be adding extreme movement to a game that doesn't have the infrastructure to support it.
Correct.
And that is 100% the case. And we're seeing it unfold right now in Black Ops 6's iteration of Warzone. And we're seeing players' experience ultimately pay the cost for that. So that 30% difference between time to kill and time to death in Black Ops 6 multiplayer, where the environment is 60 Hz, could effectively be twice as worse in Call of Duty Warzone. And this doesn't change from mode to mode or country to country. The servers for Resurgence, the servers for Big Map, the servers in the US, whether you're East or West Coast, or the servers in Europe are all fundamentally operating under the same core design philosophy of 20 Hz, which is 20 updates per second between the player and the server, which creates these massively large discrepancies between your movement, the gameplay, the gunfire, the damage, and the death. You see, the issue is...
I'm going to pause him right there. Now, I do want to point out, if you've ever played at night, you know, you've played where there's a lot of players online, if you notice, half of your servers are going to feel right. You're going to be right on par with the things that you're doing. It's going to hit when you try and hit. But the other 50%, you will have some weird issues. And these issues can range from things like, oh, you go to take a zip line, you get stuck at the top, you freeze, and then you jump off. Or sometimes you're landing in with a parachute and you go to mantle onto the side of a building as you're landing in. You grab that side, and it actually gets rid of your HUD and just leaves the like HUD from you flying. So there's a lot of issues like that that'll happen, because whenever there's higher amounts of players online, they actually raise the number of servers, which gives you more bad servers because they have to just bring on the old servers. It's an absolute mess.
And this is generally the main crux of all of this, is that Black Ops 6 and Modern Warfare 3 ultimately have very similar movement speeds. The amount of actual distance you would cover while sprinting from one point to another is identical in those games. But what is different is the amount of physical movement your character experiences.
Correct.
You are likely sliding more, changing direction more, you are capable of sliding backwards, forwards, and sideways. and your character is exhibiting a larger degree and axis of movement than it has in games like Modern Warfare 3 and Modern Warfare 2. And you can very quickly shift from going in one direction to another almost instantaneously in this game. And all of that information about your movement, and also the information of the bullets being fired at you from opponents, has to be communicated in the server infrastructure. It has to be communicated from one player who's an enemy to the server to another player who is also playing the game.
And that's a lot of different latencies. Obviously, you can see the difference between 30 versus 60 on your screen right now. But when you have you shooting at this person, this person shooting at the other person, another person shooting at you, like all of these things have to add up. And so it's all of these latencies basically adding together to make the nastiest conglomerate of mishappenings that you can possibly get. And that's another reason why you really need to make sure that the tick rate on these servers is higher, because they continuously add into each other as you go. Now, I'm not saying the server is like lagging behind by any means, but it is to a certain degree missing what's happening in real time, because the real time is not real time.
So you're going to see these huge discrepancies where someone's time to kill and time to death is radically different, or someone gets killed behind cover substantially more, or what happens on screen doesn't seem to be what happens in game. And as covered in my previous mention of Black Ops 6's multiplayer, the same situation for lag compensation also applies in Warzone.
And it was really good in Black Ops 6, by
favors
the way.
whoever is firing bullets versus the person who is receiving the damage. And what I mean by that is that if the person firing his gun has a really high latency or a terrible connection, the person who's receiving damage is still going to receive all of that damage, even if it looks like they were behind cover, and even if it looks like they're physically out the way.
That means if you are lagging and shooting enemies, that will put you at a disadvantage, or put you at an advantage versus the disadvantage the other player has from just not shooting. That's all that means.
The clip you're seeing in the background of that discrepancy where the shooter has a bad connection was in a 60 Hz environment. The perception of that is even worse when the environment is 20 Hz. So dying around corners and dying instantaneously is just a fact of life of Warzone at this point. The other big issue that these low tick rate servers produce is something called super bullets, which actually explains a lot of these clips that I've shown you about dying instantaneously. Now, when a company ultimately cheaps out on their server infrastructure or cheaps out on their general netcode for their game, what you get is a bit of a mess. And if it's ever felt like a high rate of fire weapon, like the XM4 or a really fast firing SMG, is giving you better kills and better hit registration, that's not false. That's not you being inaccurate.
Yeah.
That is actually what occurs server side as a result of a phenomenon called super bullets. This chart in the background illustrates what super bullets looks like, which is the damage of multiple hits sent in one update. Now, in Call of Duty Warzone, the updates are 20 Hz instead of 10 Hz, so there are more updates between bullets in some scenarios.
So, to kind of explain this, like dumb it down a little bit, basically, go into Black Ops 6 multiplayer and use the Tonto, right? You're going to notice that on a 60 Hz server, it's really good. Use the Tonto in multiplayer, your 3-shot elimination, you can get a kill streak very fast. Like, very, very fast. It's much better than a lot of the other guns because it does so much damage, even if it has a slower fire rate. But when you bring that Tonto, which should naturally feel just as good in Warzone, you bring it into Warzone, and you can't get an enemy down for the life of you because your bullets, even if you're hitting right on target, will not actually hit because of the way that these tick rates work. Your bullet could literally just go through their body and miss entirely because of the fire rate being so slow that it just isn't updating with where the enemy is.
But Call of Duty also features substantially higher rate of fire weapons, so there are going to be some weapons in the game where this phenomenon is exactly what I'm talking about. And what this means is that when you're firing a really high rate of fire weapon, the damage of multiple hits, so multiple shots that you have sent, will arrive to the person receiving them in one update instead of multiple updates.
So it feels like the same time.
Which creates this huge discrepancy between time to kill and time to death. So in the case of COD, where some guns work at RPMs of 900 or 1000, they are sending multiple damage hits in one update, and you as a player on the other side of things will receive all of that damage in one update. And that's why it's called super bullets, because it's as though you suddenly got insta-killed by some kind of god gun, when in reality, it's just because the rate of fire of the weapon and the amount of damage it's trying to transmit over the server is physically faster than what the server is updating in real time.
And that pairs together with higher latency, like he was talking about a minute ago, where it'll favor the person shooting. If you have that high latency in your shooting and you're on a lower tick rate, then your bullets could super bullet and just hit, like it's like doubling the fact. It's literally exponentially harder hitting. So that's why sometimes you'll see people that are good players on higher ping on Warzone absolutely obliterating players. It's like if you VPN to India, because they're not going to shoot back, but you are going to shoot, right?
At the bottom,
and I'm not saying there's no good Indian players. That's not what I'm saying. It's just well known that places like South Africa and India have some of the worst players in the world. I'm not saying they're all bad. Please do not think that that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that that is something that has been known to happen in the past. That and like is wherever Bangladesh is. I know that that was one place that was always good to VPN to.
Bottom of this chart, you can see how 60Hz servers deal with some of these issues, because there are more updates over the space of time that damage is dealt, meaning that there is a more accurate representation of what's occurring, and it gives you as a player more time to react and more time to experience the damage that is going into you. But with Call of Duty's 20Hz servers, that just fundamentally isn't the case. And these updates that I'm talking about, the 20Hz, the 10Hz, in this case 20 for Warzone, applies to pretty much everything that happens server side. So your character's movement and your character's location, the damage that's being fired, the amount of damage that's being dealt, all of this stuff happens server.
Even putting on plates, taking off on zip lines, like literally anything that you can think happens at this tick rate, which again gives the opportunity for the enemy to get that elimination a lot easier, because on your screen it looks like one thing, on the other screen it looks like another thing. I will note that's why things like Peeker's Advantage exist as well, where you can jump out and shoot, the enemy just won't see it. It really sucks.
So all of these clips you're seeing of players dying behind cover or players dying instantaneously is just a byproduct of ultimately cheap networking. Now, the reality is, and I'm going to say this here and now,
multi-billion-dollar company
has no excuse. I am 100% doing my best to be objective about Call of Duty. I know generally that these updates are difficult. I know generally that integrations and all of the amount of work they've had to done to meld Black Ops 6 into Modern Warfare 3 requires a lot of development. I also know that stuff like audio is far more complex than it appears. Granted, I do think Call of Duty uniquely is probably the only first-person shooter I can think of that struggles with it so much.
You know what? On this note, let me show you a clip by JGod that I think encompasses this very well as to what we see versus what happens behind closed doors. Okay, so here's the clip. This is in his recent video, and he's talking about... okay, so here's the clip. This was in his recent video, and he's talking about basically what happens whenever they let creators play it early, and then what actually ends up happening whenever it gets released.
I had the opportunity to play the game early back in like June, and then I had again to play it at COD Next. And the gameplay from that time period did not have these issues. The visibility issues, the slow animations, the clunkiness. The audio was also significantly better, even better than the version of Warzone audio that we just recently had. A lot of times it's like, well, why didn't you complain then? Well, those weren't issues then. For whatever reason, when they have a small build and then it works in this little bubble, they expand it to the bigger build, it still works, and then they go to the live servers, then something breaks. So I know there's a lot of times people are just intellectually dishonest, and they'll say, oh, they don't even test their game clearly. Well, clearly, we played it early, it worked functionally well, it worked, and then they put it into live, and then it breaks. Well, you can't test live without making it go live. I don't know. It's just kind of how it works.
I will have to say right here, that sounds great. Like, oh, it should have worked with, you know, it going live and stuff like that. But I also know that recently there was a developer that came out and said, actually, they're not testing it to the capacity that they should be testing it. And if there's a bug and anything's related to that bug, they actually just throw the other like bug out and only work on one thing. Like there's a lot of big issues that are happening behind the scenes, but they are testing it. It just seems like something happens right between when it's tested and when it goes live where something just gets screwed up. And my guess is, like we're talking about the servers here, it's something to do with implementing this stuff into online servers for people to play at a very large number, which, you know, obviously every update, a couple million people hop on within 2 days and play it. And it's much easier to find these things than when 30 people play it. But even then, it's still very different from what it was in the testing. But let's move back into the video we were watching.
But it's still a challenging thing to do. And the same generally, to some extent, does apply with networking. But what I will say, and this is just a fundamental fact of the industry, is that Call of Duty is being cheap. And they could pay for better servers with higher updates, which is what they do in their premium product. And it's not like Warzone doesn't make them money. Granted, and this is...
It makes them the most money of anything else because of the microtransactions in the game, which, if you didn't know, Warzone, Call of Duty Warzone, the first year that it was out during COVID, made more money than Activision has ever seen in a single year, bro. Not even close. It was absurdly profitable for them. And then that same year, they fired like 1,800 people. I was like, okay,
it's just an objective fact of server infrastructure. Supporting more players on higher tick rate servers on multiple servers is more expensive. If you think of a Black Ops 6 game where it's 6v6 or 5v5 or whatever it so happens to be, running multiple instances of those games on one server providing 60 hertz is expensive, but it's only 6v6 and you can do it for a large number of players across that small player count because the games themselves aren't super demanding in terms of calculations. But for Warzone, you're talking 120 players in some instances. And you're talking about 120 players connecting, sending data. You're talking about all the calculations that have to occur during that.
Do we remember when we had 150 players? Like, did we forget that happened? Because is this a fever dream? Did this happen or did it not? Because I swear to God, at one point we could do 150 players and have nearly no issues. And then now we are actively lowering from 120 to 100 just so that they can figure out what the hell is going on with their servers. It's so goofy. I do want to actually for a second. I'm gonna take us out of this video for a minute. I just want to say, a lot of people think that when I say things, it's from only my perspective, and it's, oh, content creator has issues playing video game. Oh, boo-hoo him. How dare he not be able to get wins? That's not true in the slightest. Every single update, no matter when the update is, no matter what the update is, I will, faster than any of you, adapt to that update because it is my job to adapt. I have gotten more wins on this update than I ever did on any other update. I got further ahead on content than I ever have in the past. Plain and simple, across the board. It does not affect me the same way that it affects my thousands upon thousands of viewers that have these issues. So when I have these conversations, understand, I don't have a leg to stand on whenever it comes to me whining about things. But when I see so many people having these issues in the comments, that's why I'm vocal about it, is because I find that it is my responsibility. It is my job, literally, to say these things so that my community can be heard. That is the reason that I do what I do. That is the reason that I have these conversations. And if you didn't know, over the past year, I've really only called out Call of Duty like one time. Okay? I've tried to dodge conversations like this because it's really not that great. It's not fun. It's not a good time for anybody. But I felt it was very necessary with an update that ruined the fun for millions of people. I'm sure people are loving it somewhere in the world. I hear every once in a while, I don't know what people are having issues with this. I can't believe it. It happens. It like, other people do not have issues. Some people have issues. Some people love it. Some people hate it. But I want to be vocal for the majority of my audience that supports me because they don't have a voice or a leg to stand on here with a company that doesn't give a damn about them. So that's the reason I have these conversations. And react to these videos and stuff like that. I just wanted to be very upfront about why that's happening, and I figured 30 minutes into the video was a good time to say that so that we could get comments from people earlier on that are going to fuss about me fussing about things in the comment. You'll see it. Hey, if you see it, be nice.
One game. Complexities like vehicle physics, movement, streaks, whatever it so happens to be. And historically, in the past, I actually made a video which demonstrated that Call of Duty's old servers for Warzone 2 were likely being massively destroyed by the amount of AI they were spawning on the map, because they chew up resources. Artificial intelligence generally requires calculations.
Yep. Y'all heard that, right? So he was the one. It was him. It just clicked in my brain that, yeah, all right, cool, thanks.
And Call of Duty actually ended up deleting all of the AI off
Son of a bitch.
their servers because they probably recognize the same thing.
I know
Warzone
things.
is a highly played game, and it means that fundamentally, supporting higher refresh rate servers will come at a cost. However, Fortnite does it. Apex does it.
Sometimes, like when things like this are said, I just like, oh, I want to go and I want to shake the people at Activision, because this exact thing falls into the category. I don't know if you know this, but the highest number of Warzone players to ever be online at a single time was a little over 400,000. Fortnite's is like 7 million. Okay, can you understand the difference there? And look, I'm going to call out someone on the creator team whenever I mention this. I said it on Twitter publicly. They basically responded and they were like, but Fortnite's different than Call of Duty. I'm sure it is. Maybe get your shit together though. 400,000 is too much whenever Fortnite can do 7 million? Like, it's laughable at the very least. And I understand developers are going to look at me and be like, man, but you don't get it. God dang it, I don't get it. Maybe if you, I don't know, just, like, help me understand and give actual explanations, then the community would not be up in arms whenever stupid shit happens, whenever it shouldn't be happening. Whoa, crazy idea, I know.
PUBG does it, and Fortnite is arguably played substantially more than Call of Duty Warzone. At an industry standard level for a first-person shooter, 20 Hz is just basically unacceptable.
Laughable.
Competitive shooters have started branching into the realms of 128 Hz or 256 Hz. But other battle royales are doing 60. And for Call of Duty Warzone to operate at 20 Hz, objectively, is just a failure. Every other battle royale in the industry, every other first-person shooter that takes its fan base and its audience seriously, has moved to high refresh rate servers. Even Battlefield 2042, which had far more physics than the average game of Warzone, with things like destruction, tornadoes, even though the game was arse, that's besides the point, supported 128 players with all of that physics in 45 Hz servers, which
so
is
much
double
better.
the refresh rate of what Call of Duty is currently offering. The reality
I would
for
take
me,
that.
and I think this is the biggest problem, is I actually don't see a scenario in the future where Call of Duty's movement system for Black Ops 6 can work in a Warzone environment when 20 Hz servers are the reality. It doesn't matter if you're sliding in and out of cover and utilizing movement to keep yourself safe, if the server hasn't physically updated fast enough to register that, and you still end up dying behind cover.
Which I will note is most likely why we see a lot of these animations have been slowed down. We think, oh, Call of Duty devs hate us. No, they have to figure out how to make the servers work, because if they don't slow stuff down, it's not going to connect. And hopefully they fix it. Maybe they figure out a way to fix that netcode so that we can actually pop an armor box, and lo and behold, it pops out armor within less than a second instead of waiting for that while you're mid gunfight and you're sitting there like, brother, hello, can I bleed? I need plates. I need a plate. I don't have enough plates. Please give me plates. The same thing with munitions box. Sorry.
That's about it for this video today. And generally, I think at the moment, the situation after this integration is a bit of a mess. We're talking about a server infrastructure that's outdated and antiquated, and you're combining it with other things like
By at least
TTK
5
problems,
years.
random attachment issues, random issues with bugs and desyncing servers. And it's no surprise that sentiment to this update has been so negative. I actually think the ceiling for Call of Duty Warzone is extremely high, and if they fixed certain things and paid attention to core fundamental parts of the game, they would be in a phenomenal spot before Verdansk releases. but they actually have to do that. And so far, I'm unconvinced. So folks, make sure you drop a like.
All right, this is a little bit of a hot take, and I think it's going to upset a few people, but I think this is the exact reason why the Battle Royale part of Call of Duty Warzone is going to the side and people are no longer caring about it. Because I think the servers are so bad at 20 hertz or whatever that they can't keep up with it. So they introduce Resurgence. They make it where the game is more like a TDM. The servers have an easier time handling it, and it's more fun because you don't deal with most of these issues that happen in a large battle royale. Sure, they exist, but it's not as often, and you can come back even if you have the issue. And I think that it is like a vicious cycle of, all right, well, it seems like Resurgence is doing better. Well, darn it, maybe we should do more Resurgence maps. And then they do Resurgence maps and they're like, oh, that sucks. Okay. Yeah, and that one sucks. Okay. Well, maybe, you know what? We'll do Rebirth again. Did that? Oh, that worked. Oh, maybe it's Rebirth. Brother, have you ever thought for 2 seconds, Call of Duty, that if you just made something work well, I don't care what it is, if you made it work well and made it fun, then it would be great. That's the reason that Verdansk worked, is that it was tied to Modern Warfare 2019. It was always solid with what was going to happen. Sure, we could get new weapons, but it was solid with what was happening. We knew that the sliding was going to be like this. The jumping was going to be like that. We had bunny hops. We could do cool shit all the time. It was very nice. And then every time they try and reinvent the wheel, they break something. And then they see the data on the back end of people like, well, dang, they're going to Rebirth. It must be real freaking good. Yes and no. It's like Resurgence makes sense, but right now it's a glorified TDM where at the final circle, it's a battle royale. For a singular circle, it's a battle royale. But for the rest of the game, it's a glorified TDM. And people do that because they don't feel like they're wasting their time, because when you hop into a game of battle royale and these stupid issues happen, then you don't want to play anymore. So you're like, well, I guess I better go play Resurgence because I'm getting tired of putting 18 minutes into a game and then dying to some absolute bullshit. So I feel like there's a lot of ways that Call of Duty just gets lost in their data, and they don't realize how the data can lie based on lack of thinking, right? You look at the data, you don't think about the data, you don't think, why are people doing this? They just assume that people like this better. But why do they like it better? It's the same reason that I believe that skill-based matchmaking might be the dumbest thing on the face of the planet, because you look at the data, just like they did with Warzone 2. They were like, what? Well, dang, it looked like people like to go a little bit slower. What if we throw that into Warzone 2, and then we should be pretty solid? Well, the issue with that is they make it slower. Everybody hates the game. Everybody. There was like 8 people total that were like, man, I really love Warzone 2. You got to understand that the data is not always right. It's, why does the data say this? You should not just trust the data up front and assume that it means what it says right there. You should get firsthand accounts, communicate with people, and figure out, well, why are you playing Resurgence? Well, actually, because when I die in the big map, it's a hock of bull. That's what it is. Like, that's really what it comes down to. I don't think Resurgence is really all that great. And I think that it really has actually ruined the idea that Warzone was, because it's only there for people that just couldn't get into Battle Royale. Obviously, there's people that love it, and I'm not trying to take away from the people that love it. Those people are cool, but the people that switch from BR to Resurgence because of the issues in BR should be spoken to so that we can figure out how to address those issues. Either way, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed. If you didn't enjoy, that's fair enough. Subscribe if you want me to react to more topical information. Otherwise, I got some great videos coming out with spectating and random duos. I love you. Why do people watch me?